Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome back to the For the Love podcast. It's me and Amy.
Thanks for joining us.
Me and Amy are here. I've loved having you on the show with me. I was just right this very second while we're recording. My friends are in there. They have a design business and they're like working on my house right now. And Jenny was just asking me, she's like, are you having more fun on the podcast now that Amy's onboarded? I'm like, by a factor of 1 million. I just told her that right before we started. It's fun.
You.
We're having fun.
People keep asking me,
Oh, yeah.
like, do you love it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it so much fun?
Mm-hmm.
And my standard answer is, love is a strong word.
As is fun.
As is fun,
Uh-huh.
but it feels right.
Listeners, okay, what you need to understand is that when Amy says feels okay, that's the top rung of the ladder, okay? Like, we've reached it. So I'm saying fun, enjoyable. She's like, feels okay. I'm saying we're saying the same thing. You're like, it actually feels okay.
It feels okay, and I'm going to stay in it.
That's it. There it is. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
Very, very proud of you. This was a big ask and a big yes. Big.
A huge yes.
A huge yes. And that is a good segue because, well, first of all, you guys, we have, Dr. Martha Beck on today. So I'll roll out her credentials in a minute if you don't know Martha Beck. Anyway, she's a big deal. Oprah's favorite. So Oprah's favorite's our favorite. And that's going to bring us to our first segment before Martha comes on, which is Bless and Release.
Bless and release. You know you got to bless and release.
Just let it go, girl.
These are just things that Amy and I are like, at this stage in our life, there are certain things we're just going to hold in our little hands and then open to the world and say, goodbye, good luck on your journey. I won't be holding you anymore. I am unable to deal with this. I'm unable to care. So in Bless and Release today, this is the idea. What will you release at the end of this sentence? It's too late for me to fill in the blank.
Honestly, I'm releasing the entire sentence, the entire idea of it's too late.
Love it.
I'm not going to pick one certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything. It's because it's not too late for anything.
Truly.
At all. And I don't really like that.
Uh-huh.
I like things in categories, in compartments, safe, predictable. I want to plan and know what's coming up.
Yep.
And if you actually admit that it's actually not too late, then that opens up a lot of things that can be surprising and that you can't control. And in the past, I would have said, no, thank you.
No, thank you.
That's not for me.
That's not quantifiable.
But I'm learning that it might be better to admit that it's true. It's never too late.
Yes.
And I mean, we've heard that our whole lives. It's never too late, but...
Yeah, but there's one thing about hearing it and there's another thing about believing it.
Right.
You know? I mean, it is like that's not a trope, but that's kind of a phrase.
Right.
Listen, I've asked you this on the show several times and you don't seem to care. So you're 53 and you're just starting a new job.
I'm starting a new job.
Yeah, because this is a job.
That technically, I did ask for it, just not specifics.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you and I have been having this conversation for a while, but I know specifically for at least a year, I would say, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Like, here's my skill set. Here's the things I have to work around that are not going away anytime soon. A 40-hour-a-week job is not going to fit for me.
Nope.
I already have a part-time job. Like, what on earth could I do? And at first I asked it with a little panic.
Sure.
Like, I have to be doing something. I have to be making a difference. I have to be like, whatever, spending my time wisely, using my gifts.
Sure.
But then I started asking, like, with curiosity, what on earth is the universe going to drop in my lap? Like, what could it be? And it's not that I was saying, like, I would like it delivered next Tuesday, but I was becoming more and more open to just seeing what happened. And then this happened.
I know that's true because my invitation to you to be my partner on this podcast is so outside your zone, so outside. It's not even adjacent to your zone. This level of visibility, just for a million reasons. But you said yes before I even told you what it was.
I know.
That's not even your way.
That's not my nature.
God, it really isn't. And so it's never too late.
It's never too late.
Even never too late, to your point, to cultivate this internal spirit of curiosity and then just see what happens. I love that. Listen, in a granular way, I mean, if you just want to get down to super small things, just this very year, I decided with so much evidence to the contrary, so much, all of it, all evidence pointing in an opposite direction. And yet I said, I want to be a person who has live plants in her house. I want it. I want the life in my home. I want leaves that are planted in soil and putting oxygen into I want to be a plant person. Having no evidence that I could succeed at.
And you've done it.
I have done it. I have done it.
Mostly.
Okay, I have mostly done it. And because now I'm a gardener, now I'm a plant person, and so I have all my apps and my leaders and my mentors and my plant savants who are helping me know what to do. But they're like, that's part of it. Some plants come and go. Like, so I'm making my peace with some of the life cycle of some of these damn things like the fiddle leaf fig.
Well, that's a special case.
Thank you.
It actually is a snowflake.
You are correct.
Among plants. And don't discount your previous foray into gardening. Like, you've done this before with outside plants. You had a beautiful garden.
Okay.
We did this together.
You're right.
For a greater purpose. You did well in that season, and then we decided gardening wasn't for us when it's 110 degrees and the bugs eat everything overnight, which was fine. But you learned.
You're right.
And now you're taking another
living
step
plants.
towards it. Yeah.
We'll put a pin in that story because on another episode, Amy and I will have to tell you the story of when we planted, at least in your case, a massive backyard gardens in our homes. And anyway, that's a whole thing. All right. One more segment before we bring on the just incomparable Martha Beck. This is one of my favorite segments that you and I do. Rant or rave.
It's time for Rant or Rave, where we rant or we rave.
So I'm just going to drop the word. I'm going to drop it right in between us. And you can rant about it or you can rave about it.
Okay.
Frankly, you could do both, but I'll just see which way this goes for you, and I think I know. Here it is. Emails.
Rave.
I knew you were going to say rave. I literally knew you were going to say rave.
I understand how your inbox can be an agent of chaos. I have some of my kids have thousands
Oh, sure.
of unread emails, and I can't even think about it. And every so often I'm like, can I help you with that? And they say no. And
then you go, this is not my problem in the universe. It's
I don't
yours.
say that right away, but
Oh, sure.
it's true. I actually love it.
Okay.
Being an introvert, I can communicate
Oh, all right. Well, there's that.
effectively without having to talk to anybody.
Sure.
I have all my little boxes. I check it several times a day.
What do you mean by all my little boxes?
Like, subcategories
got it.
where I can tag things like everything podcast related and
This goes into
everything
medical.
school related. Yes. I really love it, but I keep a handle on it.
I'm sure you do.
I have more than one address, but those old ones, that's some random login that you can't actually get rid of. But I really only have one working email address that I check regularly.
Well, that is the same for me, as you well know. I also have one working email address, and it's the same email address that I very first ever had. Yes. It's my very first ever email that I still use singularly. It's AOL. And when I have to give that email address in like a public setting, they need your email for something. I start having this feeling rise up through my chest. It's so shame-based. Like, I get to the first half, the part of my handle, and then I'm like, and I always have to give them a little song and dance. Like I know this is crazy, and I'm like probably the only person on it, but it's just like AOL, okay? AOL.com. And they're like, always trying to make me feel better. Like, sometimes other people have that. I'm like, do they? Anyway, I am mostly rant on email. Yeah. I mostly rant. And I'll tell you, the reason I am mostly rant is because what my inbox is a bossy taskmaster. There is nothing in my inbox that doesn't need me to do something. Nothing.
It's like someone actually calling you on the phone.
Yeah, it is. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll just put you in line with the other ones that are already in here who want me to do something. And that's not really fair because this is my work. It is my job, and these are my partners, and this is our shared business. So it makes sense that there are things to do. But for the most part, it is devastating. It's just absolutely devastating. It's never personal. It's like, oh, okay, let me get back to that when I'm done with this.
I do understand that.
Thank you for understanding. Okay.
What do we have today?
We have a big one.
I think we have something to help you with your strong feelings and anxiety about your email.
That's a really good segue you just made.
Thanks.
That was really keeping your head on a swivel right there with like relevant bridge to the meat of this episode, because we have the brilliant Dr. Martha Beck on today. Okay. Amy and I are super familiar with Martha, but in case you're not, here's your background info. So she is best-selling author, life coach, speaker extraordinaire, like all around the world. She holds, this is boring, super boring, but she has 3 degrees from Harvard. It's just whatever. All in social science, which makes her so interesting. Just the way she dovetails social and science is fascinating to me. I could have heard her talk about this anyway. Also, this is also boring, but Oprah called her one of the smartest women I know. So, doop. Martha's published work has several books and memoirs, over 150 magazine articles, 2 decades of monthly columns for the O magazine, Oprah. She also has 2 podcasts that you would love. One is called Bewildered, and that's with herself and Rowan Mangan. And then also she has The Gathering Room. They're just as full of brilliance as she is. So her most recent book that was recently out is called The Way of Integrity, Finding the Path to Your True Self. It was an immediate New York Times bestseller, Oprah's book club selection. I guess I've said Oprah like 4 times in this intro, but it's quite an endorsement. And then what we're also going to be talking about today is her upcoming book, which is just, I'm sure this will have nothing to do with anybody listening, and certainly not with us, not with your hosts. But her newest book is called Beyond Anxiety: Curiosity, creativity, and finding your life's purpose, which comes out in January. I can't, frankly, get here soon enough. If what she told us on this interview today is any indication of where this book is going, Amy and I just kept like looking at each other during this interview going, did you hear that? Like,
I thought I knew what she was going to talk about.
yeah, me too. That took me by surprise.
I thought I knew what she was going to cover, the science, the neurology behind anxiety, and sort of the solution to dealing with our modern world and what's deep inside.
Same.
And she did cover those things. But then she also went way deeper.
Yeah. Well, all you need to know, listener, and for those of you who like to watch this show over on YouTube in our beautiful new studio, there is a moment in the middle of this interview where Amy has her two hands on her gut and I have my hands on my chest and she's telling us what to do and we're doing it. So, like, it was...
And trying not to cry.
Yeah. I mean, we just kept looking at each other like, woo, okay. Plus a couple of really brilliant stories that you are going to love. I did. And for anybody who struggles with anxiety, who would like the very, very good news that she delivers, which is there is a way out. And it's not even hard. It's accessible. It's free. Every one of us can do it. And it's immediate. So that is embedded in this whole interview and you're going to love it. And then, of course, there will be more to come in her upcoming book. So you guys, that's enough lead in. Can't wait for you to hear this incredible conversation with me and Amy and the wonderful Martha Beck. All right, community, lucky us. We get to welcome to the show the incredible Martha Beck. What a wonder to have you here. Thank you so much.
I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I've been listening to you and learning from you for a lot of years, and your work has meant a lot to me. And thank you for being a steady voice of wisdom and guidance just through a world that keeps changing and landscapes that keep changing. And, you know, it feels like right now we're definitely scanning the horizon looking for where are the adults in the room?
Yeah, no kidding.
Where are the adults in the room? And you are one of the adults in the room. And it's comforting. And we deeply appreciate your version of mentorship to just a bunch of us normals. Agree.
So kind of you. Thank you.
Your column was the first thing I turned to when I got that magazine in my mailbox monthly. So it's really nice to meet you and say thank you.
Same.
Thank you.
We've got plenty we want to talk to you about.
Okay, great.
I kind of want to start with this idea. There's a conversation we're hosting in our community right now about this season of life that we're in, and in some cases starting over, or maybe just starting fresh, or starting something new.
Yeah.
And this idea of, are we behind the eight ball? Are we too late? Is it not? Should we have done this 15 years ago? We're having this in various strata, but that sort of idea. And you wrote this. You said, I grew up wanting to be an ecologist or a professor. However, after bearing 3 children and earning 3 Harvard degrees at the same time, I decided I'd rather just lie down for a few decades.
Yeah, pretty much sums it up.
Relatable. And it was during that time that you became an author and a life coach. And so I love your story. I love your story of starting from a different beginning place than maybe you expected to. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that story arc and how it felt literally in your body, in your thoughts, in your experience, even in your relationships, to stop walking the path that you were on and begin taking steps on a new one.
That's such a great question. And actually, it wasn't just that I started over once. In our culture, we have something I call the kindergarten complex, which means you're allowed to go to kindergarten once and be confused and in a new place and unfamiliar with everything once. And from there, you have to get more and more expert and efficient and effective. And you just have to go from great to greater, right? In a straight line upward. So that's our cultural model. In other cultures, they have the image of a cycle, of going through cycles of your life. There's the spring of your youth, and then there's the harvest and the fall and the winter, which is the end. I like to see life as a spiral. So it combines the going round and round with going forward. So it's like this, right? From one angle, it looks like this. From the other angle, it looks like this. So it's like a screw going in. Every revolution around the cycles turns you forward by one place. So what's happened to me, and I think it's happening to a lot of people, we just don't recognize it, we don't articulate it in our culture, is that you'll be going along from strength to strength, and then something impacts you. And it can be a wonderful thing like falling in love or having a baby or getting a new job. It can be a terrible thing like losing a loved one or losing your health, which happened to me. So then you kind of have to start over. And I see this as a healthy thing and something that happens to everyone throughout their lives. So we're spinning around this change. I call it the change cycle when I train coaches, and that's where we catch people. Wherever they are in the change cycle, we can coach them through it. So once I started that by starting college, by going off from Utah, where I was raised a good Mormon girl, to Harvard, where I was not taught to be a good Mormon girl. And I had to start over. And then I got married. I had a baby. I had another baby. He was prenatally diagnosed with Down syndrome. I chose to continue the pregnancy because it was late in the pregnancy. And I had to start over again. Made it into assistant professorship, decided I hated faculty meetings and faculty politics, quit everything, started over again. Decided my religion of origin was not working for me. That meant all the friends I'd had as a child and my family of origin kind of out of my life, started over again. It's just been one starting over again after another. And I call that square one. And I don't say we're going back to square one. I say we're going on to square one. Because every time you go through this cycle, first there's a sense of devastation and loss for the life you used to have. That's perfectly normal, and you should let yourself have it. Then there's a time I call dreaming and scheming, which is where new ideas start to come to you, but they're ideas that you've never had before, and you could never have had them without having been through the loss you've already experienced. Then the dreams turn into schemes, and you start to implement them, and you go out and you build a new life. I call that the hero's saga. It's harder than you thought it would be, but it's good, solid work. And then you get, I have a sense of identity again. I'm home. This is who I was always meant to be. This is great. I call that the promised land. And the motto in the promised land that you should always say to yourself is, change is still happening. There's going to be another impact. And you're going to go through those 4 stages again and again and again. And every time you go through it, you'll come out. It's like the caterpillar. It doesn't come out alive. It comes out as the angel of the caterpillar it used to be. Every time you go through this process, you will come out with powers your former self could not even imagine. So that is not a short answer.
I didn't want it. I didn't want a short answer. I wanted you to talk for an hour about that, because that is a cycle that's virtually everybody I know is in somewhere in the cycle. Yeah. Even though we just had it 4 years ago in a different cycle. You're right. Mm-hmm. There's always change, even in the promised land, which is so good for me to remember that I've not paved over the land I'm standing on. You know, it's also going to be changed.
Hold it very lightly. Yeah. Let it go, because it always will. Everything is always moving and changing.
And I love this model because there's no failure involved in any of it.
Nah.
It's all necessary. It's all moving forward. You need all of it. And when you do choose to go a new direction or shift gears, it's not because there was any failure in the before. It's just moving
No.
on.
That's how nature works. And I mentioned caterpillars and butterflies. Caterpillars have to get to a certain size before they have enough cells to create a finished butterfly out of their bodies. When they get to that size, which is called full fed, they instinctively know to make a chrysalis. And then some species just melt inside the cocoon. So they've got a tough casing, but there's just liquid inside. And it's not until it's completely disassembled that a chemical in those cells starts the reformation of another creature, and it builds a butterfly from scratch. So if you try to interfere with that and speed it up, you're just going to have bug soup on your hands. If you try to speed yourself through the process of letting go, of grieving your losses, of, at least giving a really deep, profound, heartfelt farewell to the life you used to have. If you don't go through that process, nothing good is going to come of it. You're going to end up in lifelong therapy. But if you just let yourself be held while you melt, the new idea comes. The image, the imago cells that make the butterfly, they get activated, and you don't even have to do it. You just allow nature to do it. And the same is true with struggling out of the cocoon once there's a butterfly ready to go. It's hard, it's difficult, but if you help a butterfly or you cut the chrysalis, the butterfly will die. It needs that struggle to get strong enough to fly. So every step along the cycle is powered by nature, not by us. We don't have to do it. It happens.
It's encouraging. It really does, though. It does. That sort of change and growth and emerging.
Yeah.
It really, I went through a mega cycle of this.
Really?
4 years ago. Mega, like full upheaval. And I remember people who were ahead of me in a similar story saying, just keep going. You're just not there yet. That you're not to the moment of reemerging yet. You will be. You will get there. Yeah. If you can just have the courage and the patience to sit in the sorrow, which is the last thing I wanted to do. I wanted to cut the casing.
Yeah, we
just emerge. But it took time.
Yeah, our culture doesn't really give us that time, and it doesn't give us the space to melt down and recreate ourselves. So we have to be quite valiant about defending our own space, and then we have to be brave about what happens inside the cocoon. As you said, you don't want to sit with your sorrow. Pascal once said that all our sorrows come from all our miseries come, he said, from the fact that we are unable to sit quietly alone in a room. That's like the ultimate test. I knew a meditation teacher who trained Navy SEALs, and they'd been through their Hell Week, and they'd done all these incredible superhuman things. And then they had to learn to meditate, and they had to sit there with their feelings and their thoughts and not move for hours at a time. And they said by far it was the hardest part of the training.
So when you made those decisions early in your academic career to go a different direction, where do you think that came from? And how did you know to listen to it based on your pretty structured and traditional upbringing?
Yeah.
Like, what allowed you to make a sudden left-hand turn?
This is where I get a little woo-woo.
We like it. We do that.
You like the woo?
Uh-huh.
Okay,
yeah. The woo.
Starting over from being a Mormon girl to being a Harvard student it was me going toward the culture. So I just when I was in Utah, I went along with the people who assumed I was a faithful Mormon. And when I was at Harvard, I just was like, okay, that was stupid. I don't think it's stupid, by the way, for your Mormon listeners. This was what I thought at the time because I was a snarky, bitchy adolescent. So, but when my son was diagnosed, when his Down syndrome was diagnosed about 6 months into the pregnancy, it was a much deeper shock. I had 2 weeks in which I could legally have had an abortion. I am very pro-choice. I would drive you to the procedure and put a blanket around you and hold your hand later. But he appeared to be pretty healthy, and people with Down syndrome can live very productive lives. So I was confronted with the loss of the baby I had expected, and this new unknown quantity. But the thing is, it was so custom designed for me, and I think that things are designed for us, that my whole life was about intellect up to that point. And here I was being given a child who could do everything but go to Harvard, you know? And I was like, oh, I'd put so much ego identity into that. So here was a kid who couldn't go to Harvard, and I had to decide what was his life about? You know, what are we doing here? And that meant that I had to face the question, what kind of a life is worth living? What is the reason we're here? Now, this is where the woo comes in. Because from the moment he was conceived, as far as I can remember, like from early days in the pregnancy, before I knew I was pregnant, I began to have experiences that can only be described as psychic. Primarily, it was something called remote viewing. I didn't know this at the time. I'd never heard of it. And remote viewing is when you're thinking about someone who's far away from you. They're at least not present with you. And you suddenly experience what they're experiencing. Like you see the things they're seeing, you hear the things they're hearing. This started happening to me, and I didn't know there was anything different about this particular baby. But I sure knew there was something weird was going on, because it got more and more and more vivid. And my husband at the time was traveling between Singapore and the US as a business consultant. So I would, in the middle of the night, I'd wake up and get these vivid images of a street in Japan where they were having a festival and they were hanging up, you know, flags of a certain color. And then I would wake up in the morning and I would call my husband and talk to him, and he'd say, yeah, I took a walk in Osaka or whatever, and they were having a festival and there were all these flags, and it didn't take many instances of that to figure out that I was accurately tracking it.
Wow.
Wow.
And that's quite a thing when you're like an academic rationalist, atheist, you know, PhD candidate at Harvard. But it would have been completely irrational for me to ignore that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was being trained as a sociologist to give value to the experiences people said they had, no matter how odd they seemed. So I had to sort of put that in the mix. And I was like, So by the time Adam was diagnosed with Down syndrome, I already felt like I was living in a world where things were not quite what I thought they were. And he had something going on with him. And I could tell it was, when he was born, it kind of went out of my body. I mean, a little bit remained, but it was mostly him. And so when I was offered the choice to deal with life without him, without his problems, but also without his magic, I was like, I want to see where this goes. I was grief-stricken, but I wanted to see what was happening. And it was the beginning of a completely different way of living and way of identifying myself.
I'm dying to hear more about him.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
his brand of magic in the world.
Adam is mainly just a source of energy who just hangs out, and he's like a battery that brings a level of this very sweet but almost tangible energy. And sometimes he does really odd things. I don't think I've ever said this on an interview before. I don't know if I'll be believed, but I'm old. I don't care. Once I was sitting with him in a group of about 10 people in a room, and the adults were talking, and Adam, who was about 26 at the time, I think, he got bored. And I was sitting on the floor with my back against a couch. He was right behind me on the couch. And somewhere in the conversation, everybody stopped talking, and I saw that everybody was staring at a spot above my head, like just 10 people, just open mouthed, open eyes. And I thought a bear got into the house or something. And I turned around, and Adam was sitting on the couch, but his head was turned up and his eyes were closed. And he was holding his hands up about a foot apart. And in the center between his hands was this ball of light that was moving and changing colors. And I looked around at these other people, like a dozen people in broad daylight. You know, we weren't making this up. And I remember his head fell back so far that I put a pillow under it, and we just watched this for about 15 minutes. And then he kind of snapped to, like he'd been having a nap. And he was like, oh, sorry. And I said, Adam, what were you doing? And he said, nothing really. I said, where did you learn to do that? And he said, PE. I was like, what? You learned it in your high school gym class? And he said, yeah. They had done like a week or so of yoga training.
Oh, yeah.
And he had begun doing yoga in his room. And he told me he could do all kinds of things when he started doing yoga. He said, I can make them with my feet. I can make them with my hands. And he could. And then he stopped doing it on command. He has no trained monkey, right? But I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just one example.
Incredible.
Incredible.
It was. It is.
Well, and just further proof that there's so much more mystery than a lot of people are comfortable admitting and acknowledging. Like within us, the things that draw us to a new space and the things that happen around us. Like so much of it can be studied and explained, but a lot of it is just always going to be mysterious.
In its essence, it is completely mysterious. I mean, I've been obsessed for decades with the question, what are we? What is this? And as soon as I know everybody uses this very flippantly, but I have really dug down into physics. And at the basis of matter, we just are fields of energy that seem to collapse into a material form once they are observed by consciousness. And nobody knows what the hell consciousness is. Nobody knows. Consciousness, the one thing we all use all day that is the way we are seeing and living and breathing, no one knows what that is. And I think we say it's only our own. We're the only conscious beings. Maybe, I don't know, maybe dolphins, because we have so much hubris. But I think everything's conscious. I think the whole universe is conscious. There's something wondrous and miraculous about neurodivergence.
Yes.
And our culture doesn't. I mean, that's what my experience at Harvard really underlined. They told me it was like having a malignant tumor and not letting them take it out. And our culture just doesn't give any credence to that type of experience and to the simple fact of accepting that we don't know very much.
Right.
We
That
just
becomes
don't know.
clearer the older we get. When I was in my 20s, I knew so much.
I know.
I could have told you and did.
Yes. Yes.
Like
I
every
think we all
decade,
did.
it just sloughs off. Like, wait a minute. Oh, wait, I was wrong. Wait, I have no idea. Wait, I'm not sure. It just keeps shrinking down to this tiny, concentrated interior space where only a very small handful of things feel very true.
Yeah, and it's not the mind. Our culture so elevates the mind, and the mind is wonderful. It's like a pair of scissors. It's useful for some jobs, but if you're diapering the baby, you don't need the pair of scissors. And if you're caring for life, you often don't need the mind. Because one of my favorite Indian sages says, Nisargadatta Maharaj, said the only thing the mind can say, the only true thing the mind can say is, I do not know. Because we could be dreaming anything, right? But as you said, there is a sensation deeper than the mind, more profound than anything we could think, and even in some ways far more powerful than emotion. It's a kind of stillness, a connection. I think that that's what consciousness, that's how it behaves when it's not being us or being substance. It is this vibrantly alive stillness that pervades the universes, however many there are. And we are part of it. We are indistinguishable from it.
I appreciate you talking about this interior space sort of beyond the confines of our mind, which leads me to our next set of questions for you, because we put us in line as being absolutely ready to read your next book. Your upcoming book is called Beyond Anxiety. Anxiety. It's such a bruise. It's such a common bruise. Beyond Anxiety, Curiosity, Creativity, and Finding Your Life's Purpose. Well, we were talking to you before we started recording that anxiety is just this ubiquitous through line in our listening community, in our lives.
Yeah.
And I want to start here. Tell me if I'm wrong, I guess, but why are we so anxious? And it feels like it's getting worse, not better.
It is.
And I feel like I have anxiety at this stage of my life that I didn't even know to access earlier.
Yeah.
I feel it's on this trajectory up, and I would just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is why I wrote the book, because anxiety is rising so fast for so many people. So it's spreading to more people than ever before, and it's getting worse qualitatively for the people who have it. And this is a worldwide phenomenon. And it's like, remember the pandemic, when at first there were just a few cases of COVID, and then there were like a bunch in Italy, and then suddenly it was all over the world? Anxiety has a similar infectious trajectory. It was humming along pretty well for a lot of anxious people. I mean, it was in 1948, I think, that W.H. Auden wrote The Age of Anxiety. And anxiety is so much worse now than it was when he was writing that, because it's gone vertical. In statistical terms, it kind of grows slowly and then boom, heads upward. So yeah, there is more anxiety than ever before, and individuals are getting more and more intensely anxious. This is what I set out to understand. And what I found was that it's built into the structure of our brain and then fed to us by our culture, this propensity to be more and more anxious. I call it the anxiety spiral, and it's worth a little bit, just a little bit of scientific talk. So at almost the center of your brain is a very, very primitive little part called the amygdala, which evolved hundreds of millions of years ago. And it's very effective because it's kept creatures alive for all those hundreds of millions of years. And it does it by sending out a pulse of alarm. Yeah! Whenever it sees anything. It doesn't think deeply. It just gets alarmed. So then in humans, in an animal, there's this burst of fear from the amygdala. It looks around to see if there is any predator in the room or something, a tidal wave coming at it, and then takes action to get away. And if it gets away, calms right down. Humans don't do that. That's normal, natural fear, and it's protective and it's good. But we take that little burst of fear from the amygdala, and then we say, oh my goodness, I'm terrified. What's going on? And we can think abstractly and tell ourselves stories to explain why we're so scared. Oh my gosh, why did I wake up scared today? Oh my goodness, politics. Oh no. What's happening in this place, in that place? Oh, we can bring stuff in that's not around us. An animal wouldn't do that, right? Couldn't do that. We can do that because we have language. So the storytelling part of the brain is justifying that initial sense of fear. And here's where things get very, very problematic, because we aren't actually reacting to the things that are around us. We are reacting to our thoughts about the things that are around us. So you are lying warm and comfortable in your bed. Your dog is snoozing away, totally anxiety-free. And you have no predator in the room, but you are creating an environment that is terrifying with the stories in your brain. Those feed back into the amygdala, which then gives an even louder, ah! It's like, oh my God, things are worse than I thought. Now your storytelling brain is going, oh my goodness, I'm getting more fear than ever. This must be worse than I thought. So it tells an even scarier story, which goes back to the amygdala, and it starts circling around, and it goes absolutely off the charts. And it actually wires your brain to do this more and more and more. Ugh. It's unfortunate. People, I think, in days gone by, probably didn't live long enough and get enough information to be nearly as developed along in their ability to create anxiety. We have it. Yeah. And there's a way out.
Right. So what is the way out?
I thought you'd never ask.
Like, like all I want to do now is teach my mind to access that deep space where the message is that says you're safe, without discounting the creativity of our minds. I mean, we still need to keep that, but how can we rewire it and also listen deeper?
I'm so glad you mentioned the word creativity, because here's the thing. In that anxiety spiral, there is no creativity. That many studies show that even the tiniest bit of anxiety, if you introduce it into, if you're working with people in the lab and they're solving a creative problem, the moment they get even slightly anxious, their creativity just dives, which is really unfortunate, because what do we need to deal with the actual problems we're facing right now in the world? We need to come up with unprecedented solutions for problems, unprecedented problems like climate change. We need every bit of creativity we can get, but instead we get trapped in this anxiety loop. So I remember sitting in my bedroom looking at all these studies that I had that said, this is how anxiety works on one hand. And on the other hand, there is no creativity in anxiety. And I started to realize that the structures on the right side of the brain, which deal with creativity, are the opposite of the structures that I just described on the left side that have anxiety. And if you can turn your attention, when you first get that little whoop, if you can turn your attention to curiosity, that's the first place the amygdala goes on the right side of your brain. If you go there, you start to investigate. You start to look around you and see, oh, there is no problem right here. But, oh, what can I learn about this? The brain asks 3 questions in order. Am I safe? Am I loved? And once it can get those 2 things, it can say, what can I learn? So there are 2 steps to getting out of anxiety. The first one is to recognize that an anxious brain is not a broken machine. It's a frightened animal. That's good. How would you treat a frightened animal? See a baby bunny stumbles into your house, kind of mangy and terrified. What do you do with it? What would you do with it? A baby bunny.
I would try to make it feel calm.
Yeah.
And unafraid.
Yeah. You would probably lower your voice. You'd move more slowly. You'd be soft. You wouldn't push it too hard. So I have clients who come in and they talk about anxiety, and they always say things like this. I have to bring down my anxiety. I need my anxiety to end. I am sick of anxiety. I can't stand it. It's got to stop. Never have I heard anyone come in and say to me, I'm very curious about my anxiety. I love it, and I want to be with it forever and know all about it.
Right.
So remember, it's a creature. So if you're that creature, if I came into the 2 of you and I said, look, I want to end you. I want to bring you down. I am sick of you. I never want to see you again. I'm going to do everything I can to end you. How does that feel?
Yeah, it's just escalating.
Terrible.
It's terrifying. So your baby bunny comes in and you're like, I'm going to kill you. How is it not going to get more anxious? So the first step to curing your anxiety and getting into the part of the brain that is not just creative, but blissfully creative, is to start treating your own anxiety as if it's a frightened little animal, because that's exactly what the amygdala is. So I have people say to themselves, like, find the anxiety in your bodies right now if you can. Are you guys so creative you're not feeling anxious, or can you find anxiety?
Oh, I believe we can locate some.
Can you?
Yeah.
Where does it live in your bodies?
Where's it for you?
Solar plexus.
Yeah, my gut.
Mine's chest.
Okay. So wherever that is, put a hand over it and just say to it the things that no one ever says about anxiety. You're safe here. You can stay. I love you. I would never throw you away. I know you're trying really hard to keep me safe, and you're so scared and so tired. Maybe just for a few minutes, let me take care of you. You are good. And then I start asking people to repeat the loving kindness mantras. May you be well. May you be happy. May you feel safe and protected. May you always have ease of well-being. May you feel loved. And just give this to your anxiety. Even if you just form the words, you don't even have to mean them. Just make your brain say them. And say them directly to the part of you that is anxious. So, are you both doing that?
I'm doing it in my head. Do you want to?
How's it working? No, you don't have to do it out loud. How's it working? What's happening? Anything?
Martha.
It's so gentle and sweet. It's just nurturing, and that's just not the normal response.
Yeah.
And it's better.
It is better, isn't it? I'll never forget the day I figured out. I was meditating and I was so anxious and I was like, let go, let go, let go. I was trying to do this mantra. And then I was like, it's not going. I might as well let it stay. And I started to say, you can stay, you can stay. No need to go. You can stay with me. And I started saying that to my anxiety. It completely transformed because it's an animal.
Wow.
Can
That's
you
step
talk
one.
to us about the connection between these anxiety cycles and being gentle to them and healing them and subsequently moving towards our purpose?
Yes.
Yeah, that was
So-
interesting. I didn't expect to see the word purpose in your subtitle.
Oh, no, this is where you find it. So the moment you move into a place of compassion, you're using your brain very, very differently than you do when you're in an anxiety spiral. And that sort of frees you up to pull your attention out of the anxiety and start to be loving with yourself. And one of the things we're always curious about is, why am I hurting? Why am I worried? What's going on with my life? We're very curious about our own lives. So if you can say that with love instead of, what's wrong with me? Say, oh, honey, what's wrong? Tell me everything. I always say to my anxiety, tell me everything. Tell me every little bit. And then I write it out, which has been shown to be really helpful. The moment we do that, when we get into compassion, it then activates the part of the brain that starts to connect and create. And it's part of it's just physiological. You've just moved the energy of the brain into that space. And that creativity, its nature is to gather more information, to bring things in. So while the anxiety cycle gets tighter and tighter and it locks everything else out, the creativity cycle embraces everything, including anxiety. It says, oh, sweetheart, tell me everything. I'm sure we can create a way to make you feel safe. Because the creative side of your brain can make anything. It's phenomenally brilliant. Everybody, they did a study in the 1960s to test people for creative genius so that they could use people in the space program. NASA had this study done. And they found that 2% of adults that they tested who were in high-level positions, 2% were creative geniuses. So that was pretty consistently across the adult spectrum. And then they thought to try it on 4 and 5-year-olds. Guess how many of them tested as creative geniuses?
Oh, interesting. How many?
98%.
No way.
And I think the other 2% were probably just having a bad day. You were born a creative genius. Your mind is so capable of solving the problems that make you anxious, but only if you free that genius. And anxiety keeps it caged.
Yeah.
So we do that to ourselves. And what's worse, our culture is doing it to us all the time, all the time. So we almost have to become countercultural. There's a reason creative geniuses are countercultural. They don't worry. They create new solutions. So as you start to realize, oh my God, I have the power to figure out things. I don't need to be afraid. I only need to be creative. Then you're satisfying all the parts of yourself and life gets very, very interesting. And you start to You start to have woo-woo experiences. You start to feel things before they happen. You start to feel the heart of a creature, of a baby bunny that stumbles into your living room. It gets very mystical and ends up with you feeling a deep, deep center that tells you your sense of purpose.
That is the top inch of the work that you're exploring in this new book that comes out in January, January 2025, Beyond Anxiety. I wish we had 10 hours to excavate the rest of it, because just that was really, really powerful.
Cool.
Thank you for sharing it with us. By the
My
way.
pleasure. Thank you for asking.
I'm not going to forget that curiosity off ramp.
No.
Before we let you go, can you tell our community this is where they can find this new book and your other books, of course, and your work and you and all of that?
Well, there's always Amazon.com or other online bookstores, or your bricks and mortar bookstore if you have one nearby. Sadly, they're getting less common. And I have a website, marthabeck.com, where you can find out more about me. And I have I'm just launching a community, an online community, which is like a little village online where people can go and just hang out and discuss things like this all the time. I've always wanted to gather the people that I identify with, and the technology finally became available. It's called Wilder. So it's Wilder Community, and it's its own little app. And we're launching it on September 16th, so probably it'll be out. So yeah, Wilder Community.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
This feels like the kind of instruction people don't just want but need right now. The good news is there's a way out. This is not a prison without a key.
Nope.
So
all is well. Go to compassion.
Yeah.
Stay there until curiosity rises up by itself, and then you're off to the races.
Okay. Can we try? Let's check in with each other this week and see how we do.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for the instruction and the science, so we understand better, but also for the tools to access what we already have, to find a way out.
There's a way to so much joy. I mean, it's like we've been living in this tiny corner of the basement, and we live in a palace.
That's good.
Yeah, so welcome to the palace. Go explore it.
I love it.
Thank you.
Martha Beck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, we told you that, I don't know. It's so interesting to talk to somebody with 3 Harvard degrees who's so cerebral. She's an academic. And then for her to be so woo-woo, she's figured out this, like, she's thread the needle in a way that to me is so interesting.
She has. And even though we classify it as woo, even she did, I still think at the core of it, it's still science.
It is.
Like, we just haven't figured it all out yet. But that doesn't mean it's not true. There's always more to understand. What's happening in quantum physics,
Totally.
like, is helping us understand the things that have traditionally been, just indigenous wisdom.
Yep.
That we discounted because we didn't have the data behind it, but it's catching up.
Yeah, it is. Well, and of course, the rest of the world's ahead of us on
Way
all
ahead.
this sort of the wisdom of the earth and of connectivity and energy. We're behind. We're behind over here. But those conversations are fascinating for me and also really hopeful. I think one of the things that I'm going to keep thinking about among several was her saying, kind of at the top of the show, when she was talking about if we can be patient enough and trust the process, these sort of cycles will propel themselves. It's not as if we don't have to do anything, but the fact that we can trust that this is how it works, it's these cycles are repetitive. And if we can like have the humility to just sit in it, it will spiral us forward.
Right. When she was talking about what happens in a chrysalis, I kept thinking just last month, I have a kid who collects moth eggs. He has a moth collection situation. And he had some cocoons in a butterfly enclosure, and they had all hatched. And he was going out of town for, a week and a half. And there was 2 that hadn't done anything in weeks. And I had said, why are you still keeping those? And he said, to give him more time. Like, you never know. So he hangs it from like the dining room chandelier, the butterfly enclosure. And they hang there for a week. And then one day we just hear a rustling. I mean, all the other ones had hatched.
Like long gone.
A month before.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just have some
Dead chrysalises or whatever.
dead bugs in my dining room.
Yeah.
No, they both hatched while he was gone. We went and let him go. They were perfectly fine. They just
Needed more time.
took a month longer than all the others. So, sometimes
I
you
love
just have
that
to wait it
metaphor.
out.
I love that metaphor. That's her specialty, is these incredible, like, natural metaphors that apply because we belong to the world. We belong to the earth. We belong to each other. Our futures are intertwined and connected. And anyway, okay, per usual, we have all of this rounded up for you. If you go over to jenhatmaker.com under the podcast tab, you got it all. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe to this show if you have not already done it. Like, I subscribe to all my favorite podcasts, and they keep them in queue for me, and I can look and see, this is where I'm at, it's where I left off. So subscribe, and you'll just never miss any. We have so many amazing upcoming episodes. And also, by the way, thanks for reviewing and rating the show. We read all of those. Those all matter to us. We care about your feedback. We are always listening to you. And reviews and ratings are good for shows. So appreciate you all the time. Okay. Stellar lineup these next few weeks. Exciting stuff, guys. People that you love. People that we love. We have to take deep cleansing breaths before they come on our monitors. And we are just having a good time over here. All right. That's it, everybody. Have a good one. And Amy and I will see you next week.
Thank you.